Steve was home from college for the holidays, but was not home very much. On Christmas Eve, he had gone to a Christmas party at Jimmy Duncan's house, along with some of his Boy Scout chums and high school buddies. I thought I was there wrapped up in a blanket, how I envied him. He had many friends and acquaintances he could visit and relate to. Also, how in several years he could be out of all of this. He had something going for him where areas I had nothing to look forward to, but more of the same I experienced up to now. Steve said that he would be home before 2400 hours, before the 2400-hour mass. Lookie was working at a bowling alley downtown and would not be home until much later. I remember getting the Packard from the garage in the alley behind the house and driving in around the front. It was warm for Christmas Eve and the roads were still wet from an earlier shower. Mother was getting impatient and kept insisting that we'd be late for Mass and Steve would not be here on time. We left. Mother sat in the front besides me and Sally sat in the back. After Mass, we drove home in the Packard back to the garage. You remember driving that Packard to Mass?
Yeah.
What church were you going to?
What's the Holy Rosary?
Holy Rosary? Was it packed? Was it packed?
For Christmas Eve?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did Uncle Steve ever show up?
No, Steve was, when the hell was he?
No, he said he was home, but he said visiting Jimmy.
No, he talked with Jimmy Duncan and all his buddies.
But he said he'd be back.
222 Forest Reynolds and all those
He said
guys.
they'd be home for Mass, but he never made it up.
Never made it. And then he left right away after that.
Mother was getting impatient, insisting we'd be late for Mass. We left. Mother sat in the front beside me. That was the last time I drove or saw the Packard. Steve got home much later when everyone was sleeping. Mother and Sally were talking softly in the bathroom, and I peered in to say, "Good night." I waved in acknowledgement and continued talking. I went into the other bedroom and lay on one of the several beds. I remember thinking then, where will I be next Christmas? I felt sad and distraught now that I missed home as such, but that I would face the same reality when I returned home as when I left. I had something to compare with my past experience. The Army, Ann and Jean, I thought, so I crouched up against a tree, huddled in the blanket that I had much to be thankful for at Christmas Eve. I had met Ann and Jean and I had such a wonderful times in between. I had seen some of the country and now I was in Europe. I shivered, and not from the cold, when it suddenly occurred to me, where would I be next Christmas? A shudder went through me again, and I thought of the small bedroom with its small beds side by side. I poked Lape and told him he was on guard duty and not to fall asleep. After I was sure that Lape was awake, I shut my eyes and saw Ann more momentarily as a fleeting image and was soon sound asleep. The next thing I realized, someone was shaking me to look over. There were no great sounds of mortars or 88s, nor was Lake's firing gun on the onrushing Germans. It was quiet. After a few seconds, I realized there was a young paratrooper lieutenant shaking me. "Get up, Sergeant. You're moving out." The Germans had made a major breakthrough of our first flank a couple miles west of us. I felt embarrassed that I had found me asleep and totally out of touch with the situation. He calmly told me to gather up my men, break the guns down, and prepare to move out immediately. I could hear the rumble of heavy artillery in the distance to my left. I shook the sleep from my head and gathered up the squad. Post was once again Post was once again in the area. We placed the gun in a trailer along with the blanket rolls and climbed on board of the Jeep and trailer. I sat in the Jeep along with Lape, Lester, and Huber. As we drove off with a small convoy of trucks and half-tracks, the Sherman had taken off earlier, presumably to aid in the stemming off the Panzers on our left flank. The 9th Panzer Division was driving towards Wieslam on our left, and the 2nd Panzer Division had bypassed Wieslam, swinging north in a pincer movement, attempting to cut the 18th Corps down the middle. We were caught in the middle of the squeeze, with either Panzer Division ready to pounce on us. We pulled into the wooded area behind the villages of Stoutmount and Houghton, as once again the sounds of battle were all around us, and I felt for a moment that we were surrounded. Pressure was increasing along the winding 18th Corps front. It started at Malmedy and the 30th Division going along the Amberley River to Statley, Troyes, Ponce, and Stoutmount. The 82nd Airborne resumed responsibility beyond this point, linking up with the 3rd Armored Division at Houghton. The entire area was completely overrun by German panzers and white-clad grenadiers. There were a few narrow cow trails, nothing the tank could maneuver on in the deep snow. Our northern flank had already been pierced by tanks and the infantry. As we could hear the explosive charges going off, the engineers were blowing their trees along the road we had traveled on earlier. The fighting had become so desperate and that walking wounded and aid stations were given arms and thrown into a struggle. We heard rumors that the artillery was down to its last round, and a dozen of trucks and tanks were stranded for lack of fuel. The biggest obstacles were that most of defending troops were in the bad shape from fatigue and shortage of ammo and equipment. We crouched down near the gun, and 4 of us were too weary to even attempt to dig the gun in. I told them to stay alert and take turns getting more sleep. Post had left again, but had managed to drop off some blankets before we pulled out. I gave them out. I did not know that what the situation was then, nor did I get briefed in any manner. I missed a young lieutenant coming by with his encouraging and cheerful manner. It was later in the week that I found out he was killed instantly by sniper fire. I was saddened by the news. For that, I thought he was a good soldier and an excellent leader. You want to give me the pen, Jen, and we'll hold off this story right here?
Yeah.
Oh.
I shut it down.